All right, so our first storyteller for this evening, ladies and gentlemen, want to get lots of love to Kat Ash. Yes, there she is.
Yay! Go first all the time. This is the third time. Go really
Because you're
low.
good at
I'm
it.
short.
Yeah, you're beautiful. Isn't she beautiful? One more time.
Well, thanks for that welcome. I'm about to bum y'all out really hard. I thought creepy was a really difficult topic, just so everybody knows. So, you know how you're on Facebook and you end up clicking on these links that are kind of clickbait from really trashy websites in Britain, you know the ones I'm talking about? So I see this article that says, Mom deals with baby's death in a bizarre way. And of course I had to click on it because, as most of y'all know who've been here before, my son died this year. So I clicked on it, and what it talked about was something called a cuddle cot. And what a cuddle cot is it's a cooling blanket for a baby that's died. And the idea behind the cuddle cot is that parents need time to say goodbye to their children. And so it gives parents that time. So I read this article about this family that used it for a few days to say goodbye to their little girl. And of course, being foolish, I read the comments. And the one that stuck out to me was one of the first 5 that I read, and what it was one sentence. That's so creepy. And I read it and I thought, fuck that person. They've never lost a child, clearly. Because on January 2nd of 2017, my son died, and he was 5 months old, and he was in a hospital. And it had been a bad night. We'd had a lot of broken sleep and alarms, and at 6 a.m., the alarm sounded, and I looked at him, and I knew that it was bad. And he had just had surgery, so we weren't allowed to move him very much. And I knew what was happening was very serious, and I looked at his nurse who was standing there, and I said, give him to me. So she put him in my arms, and I held him, and my husband was sitting there next to me, and we watched his heartbeat slow down to 0. We watched his oxygen levels drop to 0. He was blue. He wasn't moving. We were holding him. It was very peaceful. They asked us if we wanted CPR. They asked us if we wanted epinephrine, and we said no. All they were doing at that point was letting the ventilator breathe for him. And then, for no reason that anything we could tell, he came back. His heart rate started to climb. He started to breathe again. But we knew that we didn't have much time, and we decided to turn off his ventilator after we'd all had time to say goodbye to him. So we called our family, and they came there, and we spent the next 6 hours saying goodbye to our son. And then we turned off his ventilator and held him while he died. And after he died, we decided that we weren't leaving him at the hospital. We weren't sending him to a morgue. We weren't giving him to a funeral home. We were going to take care of his body, and we were going to take him home. We were going to have his funeral at home. We would have a visitation at home, and we would say goodbye to him in the way that we needed to say goodbye. So we wrapped him in the blankets that all of my friends made for him, and we left the hospital with him. And when we got home, there was a cuddle cot waiting for him. The next day, we had his visitation. And I remember very little about that day, only snippets, really. But I remember bathing him. I remember taking him to the bathroom and kneeling on the floor with my husband beside me and washing his body, because that's what moms do. Moms take care of their babies. It doesn't matter if they're alive or they're not. You take care of them. And that's what people who say things like that's so creepy don't understand. Just because your baby dies, just because their spirit leaves their body, doesn't mean that that baby isn't the same baby that you birthed, the same baby that you've loved and stood by every second of his life, no matter how hard it was to watch. We bathed him, and I remember my husband was sobbing beside me. I wasn't crying because I was his mommy, and his mommy had to take care of him. He started to bleed a little from where he had what's called a central line in his chest, and I asked my mom to get a Band-Aid for him because I didn't want it to leak through. And then I picked out an outfit for him. I didn't want him to be buried in a tuxedo or an angel baby gown or something that wasn't him. I wanted him to be buried in something I knew him in. So we chose a little sleeper gown that had moons and stars on it and a little pair of warm pants because it was January. And when you bury your baby in January, you want them to be warm. The next day was his funeral. There was nowhere to park in our neighborhood because we buried him in our yard. And again, I don't remember much about that day. I remember that it was cold. It was January, the wind was blowing, but it was a beautiful day. It was one of those icy winter days where you just want to be outside. And all I remember about that day is walking out to the gravesite. We'd prepared for him to lay him in the ground. And I carried him there, and my husband walked with me, and we gave his eulogies. And we said goodbye to him, and then I kneeled down and I put him in the coffin that we'd prepared for him. Without the cuddle cot, we wouldn't have been able to do those things. We were able to keep him home with us for 2 days to say goodbye. It was important that we said goodbye to him in the way that we needed. We wanted his sisters, who were 6 and 3, to be able to say goodbye to him too. He was our baby and we were his parents, and we took care of him. What's creepy about that?